The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have Rick Brown, Secretary of Finance, with us today. Welcome to the show, sir.
Woody, thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your duties and responsibilities. I kind of look at you as the Chief Financial Officer of the Commonwealth and the person who pays all of our bills.
Yeah, I get involved with almost anything that is financial. I have 4 big departments underneath me. Department of Taxation, which collects the revenue of the Commonwealth and also provides some technical advice to localities in their financial dealings. Does the revenue projections for the Commonwealth, as well as advises the General Assembly on tax policy and tax legislation. I have the Department of Treasury, which actually manages the cash of the Commonwealth. They also do debt management for the Commonwealth. All the internal insurance funds of the Commonwealth, we are self-insured for liability and those kinds of things, property. So they handle that as well as unclaimed property, and you would not believe how much property goes unclaimed in the state. We run big ads every year in the paper trying to find people that have let either monetary assets or even in some cases fiscal assets transfer to the state for lack of ownership. So they do that. And then the Department of Accounts, which sort of is the chief accountant of the state. They record all the expenditures of the state. And then the Department of Planning and Budget, which does the governor's budget and executes the budget. If you think of it sort of as the separation of powers, where one agency collects the money, another one does the legal authority to spend money, the appropriations bill. Another one accounts for what agencies do within those appropriations, and another one actually pays the checks and the vouchers. That's what I do. So it's from the time it comes into the state to the time it really goes out.
I guess time flies when you're having fun. You remarked to me you're starting your 44th year in state government?
Yes, I am. I've worked for 12 different administrations, 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats. So it's been a pretty even ride in that standpoint. I don't feel I'm the chief policy officer for the governor in terms of financial policy. It feels like it's something I've been doing for all my life because I came up through the ranks of the agencies. Started in state government before there even was a cabinet under Governor Holton. One of the ways I know I'm getting old is I worked for Governor Holton, then I worked for his son-in-law, Governor Kane.
Yeah, that's right, Governor Kane.
And now one of my peers on the cabinet is Ann Holton, Governor Holton's daughter. So I've been around for a while.
So this is the third governor you've worked under as Secretary of Finance?
As Secretary of Finance, yeah. I started under Governor Kane as Secretary of Finance.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the finances of the Commonwealth. How are we doing? I know that since the recession, revenues have been down dramatically. We've had impacts relating to actions in Washington, D.C., sequestration, for example, but how are we doing?
Okay, if you go to 9 and 10, we had declines in revenues for first time back-to-back declines in revenue. You have to go back to 2002 and 91 where you see some other declines, all associated with recession, but obviously the Great Recession was of much greater magnitude than what we had faced in the past. Coming out of that, it has been slow. The growth has been slow. Part of that is just the general economy of the United States has been slow recovering. Other parts of it are due to federal fiscal policy and the tightening of the federal belt. We are very dependent on the federal government because the seat of government's at our north borders, and we have a very large federal civilian and military workforce that go at the heart of the economy. So we've been growing, slowly, sort of stable but slow. We did bring the revenue estimates down recently. That's because we had to do more with capital gains formation and non-withholding than it really did with job growth. We had projected withholding for the year would come in about 3.3. It's about 2.5% for the first 7 months. We brought it down a tad, but it's pretty much in the ballpark of what we had projected. So it is slower growth, but it's growth. I mean, we're not losing like we did in 9 and 10. So it's a vast improvement over that.
So if we take away the military installations, the federal employees in the state, other forms of federal assistance, where do our revenues come from?
Well, from the general fund, 90% of the general fund comes from 3 principal sources: income taxes, personal income taxes. That's 2/3 of the general fund. So, all the employees out there, individuals, that's where it comes from, and they withhold all during the year from their employment. They settle up taxes by May 1st in the Commonwealth. Corporate income is about another 5% of the general fund budget. And the rest of it comes from sales taxes, which are about a fifth, or 20%. Sales taxes are shared with localities. It's part transportation, part education, part general fund, and part local. When you look at the combination of the 5% that's collected in most localities, now 5.3 with the transportation program.
It's interesting in terms of the individual income tax. I recall in the transportation funding bill last year, there's still some reliance on what's called the Marketplace Equity Act, which would allow the Commonwealth to tax those out-of-state internet retail establishments. But citizens are supposed to report those purchases right now, are they not?
Yes, they are. It's why it's called a sales and use tax. If you purchase from an online retailer that's located in another state that in physical facilities in Virginia, as a consumer of that good, you're to pay the use tax portion of it, and that's on the income tax form, and many people will fill that out. I mean, the issue there is to sort of self-police because, right. I mean, there is, and that's why you see states with favoring marketplace equity where you have a formal arrangement with the retailers to pay those sales taxes and an audible trail where you don't have that today.
Now, we have that with Amazon because they are physically cited.
They agreed. They
agreed
with the Commonwealth. They have some fiscal facilities distribution sites in Virginia, and they agreed to pay sales tax because of that presence.
Now, you mentioned the sales tax, and of course, last year that transportation funding bill changed the formula in terms of the gasoline tax and the sales tax. How does that work? Okay,
the sales tax was at 5% in Virginia prior to the transportation proposal. That was increased to 5.3% with that extra 0.3 going into transportation. It was also increased in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, another 0.7% or up to 6% in those regions. And that portion was dedicated. There was, out of the original 5%, 0.5% was always dedicated to transportation. So there's off of that sales tax, part of it goes to transportation, and part of it goes to the 2 regions, Northern Virginia and Tidewater. There's another piece of the sales tax that gets distributed back to localities, or based on school-age population for school purposes. And then there's a percent of that 5% sales tax that is actually a local option. We collect it for the localities, but return it to where it's collected.
Now, what happens if the Congress never passes that Marketplace Equity Act? There's still a hole yet to be filled.
Yeah, there's provisions for some incremental increases on the sales tax on gasoline. If that doesn't happen, to make up for the assumed funding that would come from that bill, but it'd probably be better if that bill was passed, could be broader based than just gasoline.
Now, how have the revenues come in terms of that new formula? Have they come in as anticipated?
Yeah, sales tax, retail sales has been a little slow with the recovery. It's been pretty good from what was finally forecast for the bill. Some of the original projections were a little bit higher than that, but it's once it got to a new 6-year forecast for highway construction in the fall months, it's been coming in pretty good since then, as it has on the general fund side. Our principal problems on the general fund side are non-withholding, which is basically capital gains. That's the estimated payments we collect off of non-wage, that is interest, dividends, rents, capital gains, where people pay us quarterly on estimated payments. We brought that down by about $60 million this year. So that is, we had a big slug of that last year with the fiscal cliff legislation and some of the higher income groups transacting before December the 31st of 12 in order to get to in under the current tax laws as opposed to the new tax laws at the federal level. And that bled over to the state, so we had a large spring in 13, and we're adjusting back on that somewhat now.
I take it, however, that the counties and the localities were really hurt during the recession. Property values went down dramatically. So the counties rely upon the real estate tax, and then the state, because of the need to cut back the funds that go to localities as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit different type of recession. If you look back to 2002, it was we lost a lot of manufacturers in the state. That's where you had the problem, especially in the South Side and Danville and Martinsville, where furniture making and some of that apparel went offshore, and it really hasn't returned. So in that case, the state took a hit in that recession as we cut back on some financial services consolidation of banks in that, and lost employment. But it didn't affect the localities as much because they rely on real estate taxes. When we got to 2007, 2008, 2009, that was a real estate driven recession, and so it affected not only the state in terms of the income and sales taxes they collect, but it affected the localities as property values fell. And so it was a recession that affected all levels of government at the same time. And that's what made it so tough. I mean, it was not one level doing well while the other one was struggling. Each one of them, with their own separate responsibilities, were having trouble in cutting back. So it seemed like a lot of movement on the public sector side to cope with the recession, which it was. But things are getting a little bit better now. I mean, localities, land values, housing prices are going up now, so they're seeing some reversal of that on their primary sources of revenue, like the state growing slowly as we retreat out of that recession.
Now, what about the Port of Virginia? That's a huge economic driver.
Yeah, we do a lot of exports and imports through the Port of Virginia, and we do a lot through the ports that just doesn't stay in Virginia. It moves west. You look at the railroads that go into the ports, and they go right to the Midwest. So you've got supply chain as well as finished goods that move, and then we move a lot of coal out of the ports, which helps Virginia employment in Southwest Virginia. So yeah, it's an integral part. Virginia's sort of blessed when you look at sort of the geography of Virginia that we do have. We have ports, we have the national government to the north. We have an international airport in terms of Dulles, natural resources in terms of Chesapeake Bay, coal in the western part of the state, a pretty variety of assets to dwell on, and it's helped us over time.
And I take it that farming in particular has been helped in terms of exports of soybeans, for example.
Yeah. And you probably have talked to the Secretary of Agriculture,
yes,
and he's very proud of what he's accomplished
right.
in that regard. And yes, I mean, you take agriculture; it's probably the biggest industry in private industry in Virginia.
And that port, the traffic that comes through it is going to increase, at least in terms of volume, because the Panama Canal is being modernized.
You've got all the that volume, you know, with all the supporting employment that goes into that, all the truck transportation, you know, the logistics that go into moving cargo from the ports, the rail service, and just all the supporting kinds of arrangements that make the ports possible to import and export are great economic benefit to Virginia.
Now, you mentioned Treasury, which is under your control, and debt financing. We still enjoy a AAA bond rating, as I understand it. Tell our viewers why that is so important and how it has been used to help.
Yeah, if you look at AAA is a stellar bond rating for states. There are about 10 states now that have AAA ratings from all three of the major bond rating firms. And Virginia has been a long time member of that party. I mean, we were one of the first states, or I think it is actually the first states for Moody's to be rated AAA. So we've enjoyed that, and it does give us a break when we go into market. On a typical AAA, which would be a general obligation bond issue from the Commonwealth, it's probably the spread between that and a AA is about over a 20-year period, about $300,000 a year. So it amounts to some money. It amounts to a good benefit from the taxpayers to have that. Now, in order to have that, there's got to be discipline, and discipline in Virginia has come with not using debt at every twist and turn, policing that, making sure that we can afford what we issue. And you take general obligation bonds, we do one about every 10 years. I think the first one that was done after the modern Constitution in Virginia was 1968, when I was graduating from William & Mary. And there's been one about every 10 years since then. So as they sort of pay themselves off, we think about another one. But AAA gets us not only financial rewards in the market, it helps us with the other kinds of debt that we issue, public building authority, college building authority. Those are not, they don't have the general obligation of the state. They're what they call basically revenue or appropriation-backed debt. But they trade very well. They trade almost like a AAA because of the Commonwealth's good credit rating on Wall Street, and that is a culture. I mean, we strive very, very hard. We go to I'm in constant contact with New York. I do every month when I do the revenue letter. All three bond rating agencies get that automatically. I talk to them after that. We make visits. We have them down here to see what the Commonwealth's doing, to ask for suggestions, to go over the books to see if there's any concerns and what we might do to maintain that AAA. One of the best things that we've done in the early 90s is we put together we call a debt capacity model. And what the debt capacity model does is project our revenue streams that will support debt. It projects out how we would issue authorized debt over a 10-year period. And it sort of ties the two of them together and says, okay, if we have this much revenue per year and we have this much debt that we have authorized, and this is how we're going to issue it, and here's sort of the assumed interest that we're going to pay on that, how does it relate to our revenue streams? And we tried not to go over 5% of the revenue stream. Now, we do that on an average over a 10-year period, so we might be at 5.2 one year and 4.8 the next, but we stay in that corridor. And by doing that, we've been able to police ourselves and also get good graces from Wall Street for doing so.
What type of bonding authority was used a few years ago before the transportation funding legislation was in effect to help with maintenance and capital improvements on our roads?
Yeah, not so much maintenance. I mean, it's been pretty much construction, but what has happened was the dollars that transportation were taking in, maintenance was taking off of the top, so most of the revenue was going to maintenance, which left very little for construction. The debt that was done was what we call appropriation-backed debt. That is not a AAA debt, it's a AA debt, but we benefit because we're a AAA state. That trades very, very well compared to other states. It would look like AAA to some other states in terms of what they can get in the markets. And we've done a lot of that. We do that through the College Building Authority for colleges and universities. We do it for the Public Building Authority, sort of for here at the seat of government, for correctional institutions, for the mental health and intellectual disability centers, and then we do transportation. So that is the kind of debt that we've done. On the Port Authority, we have some revenue sources for the Port Authority. It is what we call appropriation-backed debt again. The Constitution of Virginia allows 4 forms of debt. One is what they call 9A debt. That's a section of the Constitution. And that debt is defined as for casual deficits. Never been issued, to my knowledge.
Casual deficits.
Yeah, it was,
right.
and I think the writers of the Constitution interpreted that or meant for that to be sort of a natural disaster. Say if you had a Katrina like Louisiana and you had to recover, it would be sort of broad-based, that kind of thing. But it's never been used, to my knowledge, in Virginia. The second type of debt is what we call 9B. That's general obligation debt of the Commonwealth, and that is backed by the full faith and credit of the Commonwealth and the revenue streams of the Commonwealth. That is sort of guaranteed by the Constitution if we do it, and that's the AAA. That is the sort of the diamond of what we issue. And like I say, we have done that about every 10 years since about '68, after the Constitution was rewritten. So we've got about 5 of them that we've done. There's your chatter. I saw an article in the paper about maybe it's time, somewhere down the road to do another one of those. It is what the rating agencies rate us on. That's when they say AAA, that is the debt that really they're rating. The third kind of debt we have is 9C, and these are all the provisions of the Constitution. 9C is appropriation-backed debt. It is a revenue bond. It is a bond that we'd use for college dormitories, for college dining halls, for parking decks where you have a revenue stream, a fee that's being paid, room, board, parking fees to help support the debt service on that. But the Commonwealth also lends its name to it. So it's, in some cases, it's called double-barrel debt because it'd be, say, the University of Virginia would issue a bond for a dormitory, and that would be supported by the board fees of the dormitory. But the Commonwealth would lend its full faith and credit to that bond so that it gets even a better rating, and that's a AAA bond because we're lending our general obligation authority to it. So we have a few of those out there. They've always been supported by the revenue streams. As a matter of fact, before the General Assembly can even authorize one of those, they have to go through a financial feasibility study by the Department of Treasury to make sure that the revenue stream will support the debt service. So the Commonwealth in lending its name is just a backstop to that revenue stream, and we've never had to use it. It just helps an institution get a better rating. The fourth kind of debt is called 9D. That is the one that we've used the most. It's appropriation-backed debt, or debt that is backed by appropriations that are made every 2 years by the General Assembly. That's what we do for transportation heretofore, and for Ports, and they're backed by revenue streams, but they don't have the full faith and credit of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth appropriates that revenue every 2 years to them.
So what kind of funding mechanism will be used to fund the demolishment of this building and the building of a new general assembly?
That is the Public Building Authority.
Okay.
It's a 9D debt. There was some money already appropriated for being the renovation of the 9th Street office building. You see work on that across the street, and then the Capitol complex that would be finished, and then they would take on this building. So that's what's you hear when you talk about the $300 million is being considered in the General Assembly. It's an extension of that one.
And of course, the Commonwealth is required to maintain a balanced budget. We've got a rainy day fund, but we also have what's called a fact fund. Talk to us about both of those.
Yeah, fact fund was at the height of sort of the debt discussion in Washington.
The sequestration.
And sequestration, and the concerns about the effect that the federal government would have on Virginia. Back in 2011, we created what we call a Federal Action Contingency Trust Fund. We put about $30 million in that fund. And that fund was to be used to begin to offset the sort of negative impacts of federal fiscal policy on the state, either direct losses in jobs where we had, we could diversify our economy and create new jobs. And we've used some in technological areas like unmanned spacecraft and trying to seed that industry in Virginia to diversify. We've had some of it used for to try to enhance the federal government to keep facilities. We've used money out of it for Oceana in order to buy land and stop the encroachment in the crash zones around that, so that that can remain a viable base. So that was the purpose of that. The rainy day fund is for a revenue shortfall should that happen, recession-driven. The fact fund was to address the relations with the federal government.
Great. Well, it's great having you here. Just one other comment. You started off talking about the Unclaimed Property Fund, and I'm sure our viewers are interested in that. They can go to your website and get a lot of information.
Yeah, they can go to Treasury website and get a lot, or call Treasury, and we do a lot of outreach on that. I've done even at the Flying Squirrel games, done where we do, we have on-site laptop computers out there for people to log in and see if we have any hits, and of course they can follow up with the Department of Treasury. And I'm always amazed about who we find out there. I was at an elderly center up in Woodbridge a few years back where the cabinet had a setting. We all got flu shots at the same time to encourage the elderly to get flu shots. And after that, we did a little setting on unclaimed property that was in that center, and there was a woman there that had a $10,000 hit.
Great. Well, thank you for being here, Secretary of Finance Rick Brown.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.